from Aesop. Very good point. I see Hui Tong has a hand raised.
Yeah, I also have the same opinion with the two speakers. Like the snake in this story and also the story of Aesop is kind of similar. You know, they are way too ungrateful and vicious to their lifesaver. However, the key difference here is about the farmer in the story one and also the countryman. I see that the countryman in this story is way wiser than the farmer in the previous story. That yeah, he protects himself before being bitten by the snake. And I also like the sentence here. You know, charity should not be blind, and you know that teaches me a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so again, the countryman or the farmer of Fontaine's version is he's not so naive, right? He's not so naive. He's not so quick to trust the snake. Let's see. Let's take one more person to offer a response here. I see Lam Nguyen has a hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to relate it to the first story. So I read the analysis of the first story. It's in, the at the at first the farmer is not strong. It's because the situation when the snake is weak, it cannot do anything. So it's just about the kindness of the farmer. And when the snake is strong again, become healthy again, the situation change, and that the farmer should not embrace the snake in his bosom anymore, and that's why the farmer wasn't wrong. The situation is changing, and he isn't changing, and that's what caused his death. And in this story, that problem is solved by the farmer did not uh, embrace the snake into his bosom, rather than he bring the snake into the fire and it can be warmed by the fire. But however, I find it's interesting that I don't know why the countryman uh, takes the snake into the tree part, but I see that the snake doesn't die, so that it represents the evil immortal, and it will never lost in the world. And and I saw the part that they vainly sought to reunite, and I wonder what what the what which represent the three bat and what represent the reunite.
Very good. Really good point. You're getting closer to the text, and I like that. You're wondering what's up with the three parts of the snake. I think that we can use another part of the text in order to figure out what those three parts of the snake might mean. How is the snake described? The snake is malicious, right? It is malicious. It has malice. What is its malice like? How is its malice described? What adjective? Native, right? Native. The snake has native malice in this poem. What does it mean to have native malice? Here, the word means natural malice, or inborn malice, or innate, or inherent. So the snake is born malicious here. And here I think we can use the word evil, because we can use the word evil now in a Christian sense. Aesop was writing before Christianity. Fontaine is writing after Christianity, and he's writing in a very, very Christian France in the 1600s. And that is shaping the way he represents a snake. We'll read about Adam and Eve, the Christian myth of the two first human beings whom God made in Christian mythology. And we'll read about how in the Hebrew Bible, a snake tricks them into giving up their what shall we say, wholesome relationship toward God and their innocence. So it is a snake that tricks them. And ever since Christianity takes off and is popularized throughout Europe, no one can look at a snake the same way, including us. It doesn't matter if you're Christian or not Christian. I'm not Christian. I'm not religious in any sense. But we've all grown up in a world where the idea of the snake as something evil is just in the air. It is around us. It is repeated through Christian iconography, through writing, in movies, in pictures, in stories, you name it. Now, that would be the case for Fontaine's world too, even more so than for ours. And so when Fontaine talks about native malice, he's talking about an inherent malice, a natural, innate malice that the snake has. Now, anyone who's had a Christian upbringing or knows a bit about Christianity will know that the number 3 is super important for Christianity. The number 3 is super important. The number 3 in Christianity represents the Holy Trinity, this mysterious function of divinity in which you have God and Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. And they are all kind of one and also 3. They are one whole thing and they are also plural or multiple. And it's this divine mystical mystery in Christian theology. So perhaps one way of reading the cutting into 3 of the snake is to read the snake again in terms of Christian iconography as a kind of anti-divinity, as a Satan-like figure. So if we have 3 divine beings in Christianity, the snake is kind of the reverse mirror image of those 3. The snake is the satanic, evil version of those 3, being split into 3 pieces that are representative of evil. That's one reading of the 3, but I'm sure you could offer others. The main takeaway that I want you to have here is that in Aesop, the snake was not inherently bad, inherently malicious, or inherently evil, whereas here, the snake is inherently bad, inherently malicious, inherently evil. And that is because Fontaine is writing in a Christian world where the snake's symbolic function represents inherent evil. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so hold on to that. The snake has changed. Ideas have changed. In Aesop's world, people did not really think about inherent natural qualities. You did not think of someone as inherently bad or inherently good. That's just not the way the ancient Greeks thought about human beings. You could do something bad, you could fuck up, you could make a mistake, right? That didn't make you an inherently bad person. By the same token, you could do something good. That did not make you an inherently good person. In Fontaine's world, that has changed. There are notions now of a soul which can be good or bad at an essential level. And that's what we're seeing in the change of the snake. Now let's move to Russia and keep collecting ideas about the snake as we find our way back to the modern era and back to good old Donald Trump. We're in Russia now with Ivan Krylov, and this is perhaps the hardest one to understand and the hardest one to read, because you need the most historical context for this one. What does the snake look like in this version of the fable? What do you think? We have time maybe only for one response, but please keep going in the chat box if you'd like to offer responses there. I see the first hand I see here is Lan Nguyen's hand.
So I think in this story, the snake is inherently good, and however, the people put no faith on it, even though after everything the snake did for them, every good thing, even take care of their children. But it's regardless of what the snake show and talk, the farmer, the peasant still believe that the snake is bad and put no faith on it. And I think it's contradictory to the previous story in that sense.
Yeah, really, really good point. In this one, the snake comes in and the snake is strangely teaching the children in the house, right? What's the snake doing teaching children? The snake is teaching the children in the house, and the snake says, I'm good. I'm good. I know I look like a snake. And I know that snakes are supposed to be bad, but I'm different. I'm a good snake. And I'll teach your children well and I won't harm them. And in this version of the fable, the farmer slash parent says, I don't believe you. You can say that you're good, but you're still a snake. I don't trust you. Now, you need to understand some historical context to understand this the way that Krylov's audience would understand it. Krylov is writing after Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812. So Krylov is a Russian writer. Napoleon brings his army to Russia in 1812. Napoleon actually takes Moscow. Napoleon beats Russia, but then the Russian winter comes and it drives Napoleon out of Russia. But when Napoleon and his army leave Russia, and Russia is now, it's still sovereign. It did not fall to the French because the French were finally beaten by the winter. Now, when they leave, when all the French soldiers leave, some French soldiers stay behind in Russia. And they become teachers for Russian aristocrats. And this is what Krylov is commenting on. Having the foreign enemy in the house as a teacher of your children, right? That's what he is worried about. That's what he's commenting on. These foreign Frenchmen who invaded Russia and tried to kill the Russians are now staying behind to teach our children, and we should not trust them. I want to pay attention to language here too. I gave you the Slavic word and the Russian word krestyanin. Krestyanin, that's the word that is used in this fable for the peasant. That's the word that means peasant, krestyanin. But you'll notice that it sounds a lot like Christian, because in fact it means the same thing. Peasant, the word for peasant in Russian and in Slavic is derived from the word from Christian. It also means tax-paying villager. It also means human. So the farmer here is understood in a few ways. The farmer is understood as Christian, and as Russian, he's tax-paying. Who does he pay taxes to? He pays taxes to Russia. So he's Russian, and he's human. What does it mean to be human in this fable? To be human in this fable means to be Christian and Russian. So you have humanity being understood in terms of religious identity and national identity. Suddenly, this is becoming a nationalist fable. It's becoming a nationalist fable. It's no longer just about inherent evil, as it was in Fontaine. Now it is also about the inherent evil of the non-national foreign other and the inherent goodness of the national person, the Russian. Do you see how it's changing here? Does this make sense? And this is interesting because, you know, we think in national terms so much now. I think of myself, I'm a citizen of the United States. I am I forget what my title is. I'm a temporary foreign other in Vietnam. You think of yourselves, I'm sure, as nationally Vietnamese. Perhaps you are bicultural or binational and you associate with another nation, but we all the time are thinking in terms of nations, right? But that's a relatively new idea historically. That's only a few hundred years old. 400 years ago, people weren't thinking that way. Nations weren't so clearly defined. People thought more locally in terms of the village they came from. So you have this idea of a national entity coming into being in the 1800s, and it's seeping its way into this resignification, this rewriting of the fable, where the fable is now understood in national terms. But it's building upon the old ideas that we've gotten from Fontaine about inherent goodness and inherent evil. Now that inherent goodness and inherent evil are understood in national terms. The foreign other is inherently evil. The citizen of Russia is inherently good. Make sense? Okay. So let's get up to modern America, the 1960s. Al Wilson's song. The farmer has changed, hasn't he? We no longer have a farmer in this fable, in this version of the fable. Instead, we have a woman. To my mind, she looks something like this. What does this change in the fable? What is this fable about? Not Trump yet. We're going to go to Trump next. We're going to combine all this with Trump in one moment. Let's just stick with Al Wilson for a minute first. What do you think? Does someone want to offer a response, an idea, a question? I see Ming Kwan raised a hand. Please go ahead, Ming Kwan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think in Al Wilson's fable of the snake, I mean the song, it kind of depicts a stereotype of a gullible woman who is easily deceived by beautiful men, in this case a snake. And yeah, I think it's a his stereotype is wrong, but that's my view. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's it's a sexist view of women, a sexist representation of women as inherently gullible, right? Very good point. I think I saw Lam An had a hand up.
Yes, but I think like you state already my opinion about the sexist. Yeah, so
Great.
that's all.
Good. I'm glad you see it too. How about one more? How about Not Min?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I think I just want to. I do agree that this depiction of the woman is like sexist, but I do think that I think it's interesting how the woman in this is kind of depicted as like a victim of abuse because like she's been first of all her goodness has been exploited. The snakes sort of lure her in and sort of like attack her sort of empathy, like, oh dear woman, I'm such a cold snake, only you can help me. And then after she's been betrayed, the snake kind of, I guess, gaslight her, sort of manipulate her and thinking, no, it's not my fault that I'm bad. It's actually your fault that that you're gullible. It's your fault that your own gullibleness that leads to the situation. So I think it's like a very interesting sort of akin to like an abuser, like an abusive relationship dynamic. Yeah.
That's great. What a really astute reading. You're right. This is a complete gaslighting instance of gaslighting here, right? Or victim blaming, right? You should have known I was a snake. It's your own fault for what happened, right? Hang Na, do you want to add something?
I want to add a little more about her skin. Like I think from my perspective, I think she is a black American. And if we relate it to some of the historical background, is it during the apartheid, right? The Nelson Mandela period, right?
Yes, I think apartheid is happening in the 1960s, but apartheid does not come under, it doesn't fall apart until the 1990s. This is a South African, apartheid is the South, for those of you who don't know, apartheid is the South African policy of institutional racism in which white people held government positions and positions in power, and the black majority of South Africa were disenfranchised and stripped of power in multiple ways.
Yes, thank you for correcting me.
No, it's not a correction. It's just an explanation of what I think you're rightly talking about. And so Al Wilson is an American Motown singer. So he's a black man. He's singing Motown. He's singing black music in America to a largely black audience in 1969, which is ramping up to one of the heights of black civil rights movements in American history. So you're absolutely right to put a race reading on this. I think that is totally relevant. You can do it. You know, the historical material that you need to make that reading is there. One more response. What do you think, Nam Long?
I think it's pretty interesting in a way because this is written after the women's suffrage, which is the women rights movement, which I think the overall poem kind of trying to depicts an idea that women back in the past weren't treated fairly in a way, and they have no rights. They're viewed as like a person who works at home, like household and stuff like that, and basically they can't vote until you know, like up until the movement, and where like up to the modern days when things starts to change, which I find a connection between it in some ways.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The L. Wilson resignification of the fable in this song is absolutely playing on sex politics, and I think you're all putting your finger on that and seeing that. And I want to elaborate on some ways of reading it. Ultimately, what we have here is a pure, innocent woman who is bitten by an unscrupulous male snake. So I mean that it's a sexual innuendo at play here, right? This bite from the snake of the sexually pure woman. And one way of reading this is as an ideological construction of what it means to be a woman in a patriarchal society. So you can read this very much as a fable or a song lyric, which is very much trafficking in the ideology of sexism, in the representation of woman in particular, as I'll add on my slide here, as an ideal of sexual purity, of wholesomeness, representing woman as sexually innocent, right? Kind of presenting this impossible standard for any real flesh and blood woman to actually meet, to actually arrive at, and dismissing actual female experience. At the same time, I think some of you have already said this, what you see here is a kind of infantilizing of woman, treating woman or a representation of woman as a kind of a child, right? A kind of I think Min Kwan said gullible. I think that's exactly right. A kind of gullible, a really naive, childlike, innocent creature who is in need of male protection, right? So you could read this according to sexist politics and sexist ideology. Now, let's get back to Trump. How does everything that we've been talking about find its way into Trump's interpretation and performance of this fable? What do you think? First of all, Trump is following an old tradition of representing the nation as female and representing the foreigner as a kind of rapacious invader of female purity. So representing the nation as something which is pure and wholesome and good, and representing that wholesomeness and that goodness in female terms, right? Because he says, think about this in terms of immigration. He says, think about this L. Wilson song in terms of immigration. So here, the female represents the USA, and the snake represents rapacious immigrants, right? Now, where else can we see these ideas playing in Trump's politics, in his political interpretation of this fable? Well, what are the immigrants like? Yes, Nguyen Tao.
In the way Trump interpret the poem, he add more word in it. First, he from half dozen snake, he put in half-hearted frozen snake, and he added a lot of wishes and more surely thank you to stress his feeling about immigrants, which put a lot of hatred and expect a lot of hatred toward the immigrants. That's
Yeah,
what I
that's
get
right.
from. Yes.
For sure. I think that's all there. That's right. Koi Kao, what do you think?
I think that the representation of the immigrants here are like, as you said in the La Fontaine text, they are inherently malicious because in the speech made by Donald Trump, he did say that the U.S. citizens being shown here as the character which he mentioned, trying to embrace these people, so-called immigrants. But all the immigrants do is that they bite these people. So I think that the message that Trump is trying to give out here is that these people are not worth embracing and that we need to let them go because ultimately they are just snakes who harm the Americans.
Great. Really good point. Time for one more. Lam Nguyen, do you want to add anything?
Actually, I just have some comment on that. Actually, originally the U.S. The white people in U.S. are actually the snake in the first story, in the first time, because the Native American is red skin, not the white skin. So I think, and I think the idea of Donald Trump come from some problem, including such as the jobless rate, and for instance, like immigrants come to American and steal the white people job there, and that's why Donald Trump doesn't like them. And I feel like he forgot his origin, and he assumed that we should not let other people come here and to steal everything of them, regardless that everything which builds the American so great today, it comes from the diversity and from a lot of come from the people around the world. And I think he's some some ungrateful person in some manner, and that's why I think he's much more alive to the snake in the first story.
Yeah, I agree. I think Donald Trump is. I mean, I'm pretty clear with my politics, and I hope you don't mind. I like to be transparent about these things. Donald Trump is, to my mind, the most snake-like politician that I've seen in my lifetime. But what you're putting your finger on here is a contradiction of values, and that's really important. You're putting your finger on the hypocrisy underlying this position, this political position of xenophobia, of anti-immigration. And what you're acknowledging is that America was first built on a history of quite violent and quite bloody colonization. And then it was built on a history of immigrants. But now in modern politics, you have this, this history being hypocritically erased and overlooked in anti-immigration policy, right? And it's a very good point. It's always going to be important to, in our reading, to look for contradictions of values in any text that we read. What we see here, ultimately, in all of our reading today, is that Trump is, and I've added some text here, and I'm just reading the text in my slide if you want to follow along, is that Trump is drawing on ideological traditions. And these ideological traditions understand the snake as a symbol of evil. We can trace that back to Fontaine and to Christian understandings of the symbolism of the snake. We can understand Trump as seeing things in terms of seeing evil itself or any character trait as something innate. Again, people did not think that way in ancient Greece. Trump has inherited this idea, like many of us, that character traits are essential, that one can be evil or good, and that can define who that person is. And of course, Trump is thinking about those innate character traits in national terms. Going back to Krylov in Russia, he's thinking about them in national terms. He's thinking that the non-American is innately bad or evil, whereas the US citizen is inherently good or pure or wholesome, like the woman in Al Wilson's lyrics. He's also understanding those innate character traits in sexist terms, of course, too, right? The woman as being pure and childlike, and he's understanding the nation in terms of sexual politics. The nation as a sexually pure female, the nation as good, wholesome, innocent, perhaps a bit naive and in need of protection against the horrible foreign invaders. Is this making sense? What I want you to see is that all of these ideas are floating underneath the surface of Trump's interpretation of Al Wilson's song. All of these ideas are in there, flashing out, and they're flashing out across centuries. We have inherited ways of understanding snakes symbolically. We have inherited ways of understanding character traits, good and evil, symbolically. We have inherited ways of understanding the nation and the self as a citizen. We've inherited all of these ideas down through the centuries and through the study of, in this case, a handful of fables and their historical contexts. We can come to understand how those ideas have come into being over time and how those ideas have shaped the world we live in today. And that's the main point of this class. We're going to be reading all of this ancient, old stuff. We're going to be reading stuff from the other side of the planet, quite far away from Vietnam. But everything that we read has shaped our lives as individuals, has shaped our communities, has shaped our relationship to others, has shaped our understanding of ourselves. So we're looking at the origin of very popular ideas and how those ideas have shaped and changed over time and shaped us today. So this little lesson here is designed to kind of show you what the whole class is going to do, what Global Humanities is about, and what we'll be doing the whole term. Does this make sense? Questions, concerns, thoughts? Koi, Kao, please go ahead.
Yes, so I just saw that Trump's interpretation are drawn mostly from Fontaine's, Krylov's, and Al Wilson's song. I just want to trace back whether or not there are notions of the two earlier pieces, the Aesop and the Pocket Tantra, and what does the contrast seen in these Aesop and Pocket Tantra's work contribute to shape understanding of Trump and our people nowadays?
What a really, really good question. I can think there's plenty of ways to answer that, and we could spend weeks talking about it. You could write a paper about that. That would be interesting. But I can think of two responses off the top of my head. One response is that Aesop and the Panchatantra function as they function as a kind of a, what's the word? They throw into relief how things change. They help us see how things change. So by understanding that Aesop is not thinking about inherent evil, that doesn't really exist in his culture, that helps us see it in Fontaine. That helps us see that when inherent evil arrives as an idea that people are trafficking in, when it arrives on the popular cultural scene, the idea that people are inherently bad, when that arrives, that is not a natural inherent idea. It's something that comes into being over time. So Aesop and the Panchatantra help us understand that. Because the snake is not evil in Aesop and the Panchatantra, we can learn how to study for when the snake starts to become evil in popular culture, and we can learn how to study for when people start to think of character traits as essential, innate, or inherent. Make sense? That's one way. So that's one use of those ancient fables. They help us see how things change in the modern era and help us see that the way that we think is not natural. The way that we think is always cultural. It's always coming into being in cultural politics. Another thing, another point, and perhaps a way that we see the modern versions of the fable connecting to the ancient version in Aesop, the way we see them connecting, not differing now, but actually connecting, is that in Aesop's fable, we see that the main idea is that the world is unjust. The world is unjust. Don't look for fairness in the world. Don't look for justice in the world. That's not what the world was meant to be. And that idea is, of course, also not a natural idea. That is a political, cultural idea. And we see that it goes all the way back to Aesop to explain why some people are slaves and why some people are aristocrats. The world is unjust. That's just the way it goes. Some people are unlucky. Now, this kind of rhetoric, this ideological understanding of the world is actually quite close to Donald Trump's understanding of immigration policy. Some people are just born to poverty in war-torn parts of the world, and that's nobody's fault. The world is unjust, but it is not for the United States of America to take those people in. Some people are born into wealth, and some people are born into poverty. Some people are born lucky, and some people are born unlucky. And that's kind of the basic foundation of Donald Trump's immigration policy, which essentially says, if you were born unlucky, fuck off, stay where you are. Does that make sense? I'm being provocative on purpose. You know, I try to get your attention that way. I hope it's a little jarring, but not too much jarring. But does that make sense? Do you see how that we can kind of connect these ideas to the ancient works of Aesop as well? Okay, hopefully the silence suggests that it is understandable. If it's
Yes,
not,
it is.
Okay, good. Okay. Other thoughts, questions about this? Yes, please. If we go back to Aesop, yes, he is, but I wouldn't say that he's I think that he's consciously and actually rather transparently resignifying it. So resignifying it, which is different from misinterpreting it. He's kind of rewriting it. He's saying, here's my version of it, right? And I'm going to kind of rewrite it for a modern audience and try to make sense of it in a modern way. What's interesting is the way that when he does that, he draws on a whole history of ideas and how we can look back to the earlier versions of the fable to see how those ideas develop over time and how those ideas become accessible to him as things that he can write into the fable because they are ideas that are floating out in popular culture. Yeah, thanks. I agree. I also find it incredibly unacceptable and awful. and I'm happy that you're reading more about it. That's really interesting that L. Wilson's daughter chipped in. I actually remember reading about that a year ago when I first put this lesson together. And so what you're seeing is, yeah, so she can say he's misinterpreting my father's song. My father had no intention of writing this in terms of immigration policy, right? That's not what the song was to L. Wilson. But I think that Trump is, I will say in his defense, he's not trying to give us L. Wilson's version of the song. He's saying, here's Donald Trump's version of the song. He's going to change the meaning of the song, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. Right. Really good points. Thank you. Other thoughts, other reactions? We have about 10 minutes. Maybe I can talk to you for a few more minutes about writing. Is that what we should do with our time? Okay, thanks. Okay, let me just tell you what I want you to do for next time as well, just to make sure that we're all on track. So for next week, in our first class next week, we're going to read Plato's Allegory of the Cave. So that's just 9 pages out of the Republic. And I want you to think about what you have in this Allegory of the Cave is Socrates talking to Plato's brother Glaucon, and they're trying to figure out what good education is. What is good knowledge? So Plato's thinking about a kind of ideal republic. He's thinking about an imaginary state. He's saying, if I could create the perfect governmental system, what would it look like? What would the perfect governmental system look like? How should it run? Who should be leaders? Who should not be a leader? Who should have access to power? How should power structures function? And they start to think about education. How should education work? What is the best education? What should one pursue in education, in philosophy? Philosophy is education for Plato. It's the love of wisdom is the literal translation of philosophy, love of wisdom. So if you're pursuing the love of wisdom and trying to become educated, well, how to do it? That's what these 9 pages are about. So just try to get a handle on the basic idea. Plato's giving an allegory of a cave. He's giving his own kind of fable. He's giving a story that represents what education should be for him, what it should look like. And he's thinking about it in terms of a cave. The uneducated people are the people in the cave. And as they move from a place of ignorance and lack of education in the cave, as they move towards wisdom, they move out of the cave. So think about how education looks for Plato. I would also encourage you to start reading Sophocles' Oedipus. Again, Plato is only 9 pages, and you're only going to have 2 days between classes to read Oedipus, which is a longer play. So I say start reading Oedipus now. Manage your time to get to Oedipus in time for our class 1 week from now. I think I just saw a hand raised. Was it Nguyen who had a hand raised?
It's me. I just want to ask for a clarification on the discussion. I know that you said we will post our take on Plato and Oedipus on the discussion tab on Monday. I just want to ask for a clarification, like when exactly on Monday will be the deadline for our discussion, or we can just post anytime during the whole day of Monday. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. 5 p.m. So if you look at check out the syllabus here, 5 p.m. on Monday, okay?
All right, thank you.
The reason for that is so that I have time to read before class on Tuesday morning. That's why I want you to do it by 5 p.m., okay? So please do it by 5 p.m. And yeah, sorry, I said that we'd get to writing, but I think we won't. I'll just introduce these texts, and then we only have 5 minutes left, so then we'll call it a day, okay? But don't worry, we'll have plenty of time for writing instruction going forward, and I will make time to squeeze it in, okay? So Sophocles' Oedipus, I want to introduce this really quick. This is a tragedy, so it won't end well. Be warned. When the Greeks do tragedy, they mean it. Greek tragedy ends in blood and horror. You can count on it. What's happening in this story? Oedipus is a king. There is a plague in the city of Thebes, of which he is king. And he has, as the ruler of the city, he has to figure out how to combat this problem of plague. Why is this plague falling over the city? Sounds like a lot of our modern questions, right? He says, why is this plague falling over the city? And in ancient Greece, you would think that it probably has something to do with the gods. You would think that the gods are displeased. The gods are upset with something going on in the city. And so Oedipus has to solve this riddle. What's wrong in the city? What's going wrong? Why have the gods punished us with this plague? And so ultimately, what Oedipus is, the reason why I pair these together, these two texts, is because Oedipus is someone who is searching for the truth. Oedipus is a searcher for the truth. Oedipus is trying to figure out and understand his world. He's trying to understand the riddle of his existence. And so we can ask ourselves whether he does it in the right way. Does he do it in a way that Plato would approve of? Does he approach the pursuit of knowledge? He has a question. Why are the gods angry? Why is this plague here? How does he pursue the answer to that question? Does he pursue it in a way that Plato would like, or does he pursue it in a way that Plato would not like? And sometimes he, just to give it away, sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. So we can think about it that way. Think about Oedipus as a kind of detective. People have thought about this as a kind of the first detective novel or play. Oedipus is a kind of detective trying to figure out what's going on in the city, why this plague is here. And we can ask ourselves how he goes about trying to find the knowledge that he is seeking. So it's a question about education. It's a question about epistemology. Again, epistemology is the study of how we understand knowledge, how we obtain knowledge, how we use the knowledge that we obtain. How does Oedipus do that? Does he do it in a good way or a bad way? Okay, so that's Oedipus. So I'd say start reading them both now so that you're ready for class next week. Now in Canvas, again, post in Canvas by Monday. And I just want to say that you can follow, again, my questions here. What is Plato's understanding of knowledge or truth and how to acquire it? What is Oedipus's understanding of knowledge and truth and how to acquire it? And what besides the obvious is Oedipus's flaw, or what obviously is Oedipus's flaw? Maybe it's not so obvious. We can just ask what is wrong with Oedipus? What is his flaw, his character flaw? Now, you don't have to address both texts in the discussion, okay? You can just write about Plato, or you can just write about Oedipus. Write about the text that interests you. If they both interest you and you see a connection between them, cool. Then write about both, that's fine. But I just want you to know that you don't have to write about both. You just have to write about one or the other. Make sense? Okay. I would also encourage you to check out my slides about writing, which I have in our module. I will also, let me say, actually, I just stopped sharing. Let me share with you again. Sorry. It's one more thing that I want to show you just because I want to make sure that you all see how to do it and all see exactly what I'm talking about. So I'll go into our course module. I think I have it open here. Okay, here we are. So when you go into our course in Canvas, right? Again, you'll see the discussion here. Again, you can sorry, I'll put it in student view. So this is, you'll see something like this. You can reply to each other again. That's fine. Okay, feel free to reply to each other. Feel free to like each other's posts, stuff like that. This is a discussion between you. When you go into modules, you'll see that I put the PowerPoints in modules after our class. So I will always do this. After our class, I'll put the PowerPoint in here so you can revisit the writing lesson. I know that we haven't gone over all of the writing lesson in class, but feel free to look through it. There's different points and tips in there. We will go over it together eventually, and I'll continue to add more and more writing lessons over the semester. But feel free to look this over if you have a few minutes. We also have the PowerPoint from class 1. I will add today's PowerPoint in here. I will always do that. I will also add a Word doc text document that will try to summarize some of the main points that we went over in class. So you'll have these opportunities to review anything we talked about, all right? So if a class was a little hazy to you, or you felt like you missed something in the lesson, or you missed something, the PowerPoint moved too quick at one point or something, and we didn't have time to address your question, go back and look at the slides that I'll add here, and go back and look at the Word doc summary that I will add here, and see if that helps you figure it out. Talk to your classmates about it. See if your classmates can help you figure it out. And then if you still have some questions that are unanswered that you want to talk more about, please get a hold of me or the teaching assistants, and we're happy to talk more about it with you, okay? Okay, I think we can end there. I hope you enjoyed our Fables of the Snake. I hope you enjoyed our travels through time. Have a great weekend, stay well, and I will see you next week, and we'll do Play-Doh. All right? Okay, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
Thank you
today.
so much.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
làกัน
That was cool. Thanks.
You're welcome, bro.